Welcome back to Data Driven Leadership. Today, we are thrilled to have Lina Mikolajczyk, the Director of Reporting and Analytics at Bumble. Let's get into it. Lina, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we are really excited about this episode. I think the idea of Bumble and some of its competitors and where they came from, it feels very recent. And I also think that in my head, it requires a high degree of data and analytics in order to run a business like this. So I'm extremely excited to talk to you. Thanks for being here.
I hope I can give you what you need.
Yeah, the bar is high, okay?
Where's hot?
So, okay, first, before we get started on all my peppering questions, and I will confess that I met my husband on one of these apps. So I'm a believer, okay? You're talking to a believer.
That's what we want to hear.
Tell me about, when did you join Bumble? Where were you before that? I'm just curious about your background.
Yeah. So I've actually not been at Bumble for very long. I've been there for just over a year. Before Bumble, I was at Dojo, which is a fintech in London that specializes in card machines. And before that, I kind of dotted around some scale ups and startups, but the longest part of my tenure was at Hilton. It was also like probably the most fun I ever had, because at that point, Hilton was like really building out its e-commerce platform. So I was kind of there for the ride.
Oh,
But,
cool.
but yeah, so Bumble has been just over a year. And interestingly, one of the reasons why I took the Bumble job was because outside of the like awesomeness of the data and able to really make an impact for people like you, right?
Yeah,
Met their partner on the platform. But like for me, it was really an opportunity to take a team that was really well established and elevate it even further. Because previously, all the roles I had taken had all been focused on really scaling a capability. Whereas this
sure.
one was like, how do we take what we already have and make it even better?
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. So, one of my questions I was going to ask you is, for someone, I think you have a cool job. And I think I'm not the only person who thinks you have a cool job. So, one of the things I did want to ask you, like, early, is if you were talking to someone who's graduating college this year and they want your gig in however many years, like, how do you advise somebody on, like, what do you think is the most important part of your journey that brought you to where you are today?
I think that starting early on your technical capabilities will never hurt you. So make sure you do lean into whether it's SQL or Python, et cetera, like have at least a foundation in one of those languages. You don't have to be a super expert, but just know your way around. But I actually think it's the commercial acumen and exposure to multiple different businesses, platforms, and tools that helps shape someone's career. So, one of the pivotal points in my career was when I worked at agency. And in that agency, I was exposed to, oh my gosh, like every client used a completely different tool for their analytics platform and for their experimentation platform. And so as a result, I had to dip in and out very quickly. And that me so much more hireable later because I could say, yeah, I do have exposure to Amplitude or I do have exposure to Tableau or whatever, and I think a lot of people bypass that and they focus on, right, I'm just going to go into a corporate setting and I'm going to just rise the ranks. But actually, I think, especially as you're starting out, knowing to enter a company and stay until you're like, you know what, I think I've either hit my peak, I can't go any further, I'm not learning, and knowing when that moment arises and what to do with it. Like, okay, cool. I'm seeing a gap in my skills. I'm going to go now and find something that assesses that gap or that fills the gap. So, for example, a lot of analysts will go and start on marketing or like operations, and they will continue down that path and get really specialized, and that's a fine route if that's what you want to do. But actually being more well-rounded and being exposed to more domains makes you just more hireable later. And then when you do make the decision between going down management or going down kind of a specialized high individual contributor route, you can kind of make that decision in a more educated fashion.
So, what I'm hearing you say by and large is exposure. Expose yourself to as many things as you can, as much as you can, as early as you can. And it gives you more broad access. I mean, when you're looking for, if you're a BI developer, you're not only constrained to looking for jobs where their tech stack is, they're working with Tableau. If you know BI, Power BI, and you have more options. And so I love that. Also, I mean, I work at a consulting firm, so that makes sense to me. I'm a better consultant on each project because I've done the one before it. You know what I mean? That concept of, you're more versatile. One, I already just enjoy hearing the way you reflect on things. 'Cause I really enjoy your insight, Lena. One of the things that we have to sort of couch this conversation in, because I think people who don't live in data worlds are going to be confused by this. You're running the reporting and analytics at Bumble. In a company like Bumble, I'm anticipating that when we ask about your job, there's like the business side, there's the algorithm and all of those things. And then there's the reporting and analytics behind all of that. Help me understand that.
So a couple of things. When I joined Bumble, I decided that actually we want to move away from being known as a service reactive organization. So I shed our name very quickly and we've rebranded, which took a lot of marketing skills that I frankly did not have. Um, rebranded to Advanced Data Analytics.
I
Uh,
love it.
yeah, also known as ADA, which is
Okay.
a programming language and also a historical figure in the field, which I would encourage you to look into. Um, we're all for acronyms at Bumble. And one of the reasons why I did that was because what we were doing was we were doing reporting. We were doing a lot of where's this dashboard? Run this experiment. What are the results? But the capabilities that we had in house were insane. Like we were able to run models and analyses that were far more insightful, far more impactful than what we were doing. This was one of the reasons for the change. And when I say what my role really is, it's the diagnostic arm of the business. So if we see a metric declining or even increasing, we want to know what has driven that. So that mean we, dive into the levers that drive our revenue? Does that mean that we look into the retention of our customers and what their customer behavior is and, how it's changed over time? That's our primary role. Our secondary role is to figure out ways to drive value with the data that we have. So, what are the opportunities that we have on the behavior of our customers that could help enhance their experience? And that could be anywhere between our app and the actual experience you have in our app, the matching that you have, or also like how you interact with your customer service and how safe you feel on the platform, how you engage with our marketing. So it's kind of like we have our tentacles everywhere. It's quite a large team, but our primary objective is to drive that insight, drive decision making that's informed, but also bring value to the company in ways that we may have not thought about before.
Okay. I love the rebrand, and I get why you had to kind of let's help people think about this differently. Because I think even in some of the work I've done, Indiana, I helped with the COVID project. I watched all these different data projects where the client thought the highest and best use of us was, hey, we have this question. Go run the numbers and tell us if the answer is yes or no. And I was like, hey guys, with a model, if we can think differently, we can get way faster, way smarter, and we can start to indicate with data where should we even be asking questions. And it sounds like that's the pivot that you kind of helped the department go through. Has that been are you done? Like, we've done it. Everybody's there. We get it.
I wish it were that simple. One of the things with us has been we have been on a journey with our data landscape at large. So how we look at data and how we look at the entire flow of data, something that we've been working on for the past year, which is how do we ensure that from the point when you click on yes on a profile, that particular event passes through all of our pipelines, all of our transformations, and results in a report or model or whatever it is. So we have been working on that and we've been really working on enhancing our self-service for our stakeholders. So the idea was if you're a marketer, if you're a revenue manager, you can go into our platform and answer your what questions. So any binary questions or any questions that explain what has happened should be catered for by the reporting solutions that we have in place. Anything that's deeper, where it requires more advanced modeling or deeper dive or whatever it is, the why or even how that is handled by our team. Well, I think one of my big learnings as a leader has been you can change the tools and you can change the way your team operates. You can scale them up. But the biggest part of this change, it's a cultural change. And so having stakeholders on board to be able to self-serve and incentivizing them to do so is big. I learned that I wasn't a very good marketer when we rebranded. I also learned that kind of changing the culture isn't a one person job. So the one, I think, piece of advice I have when you have this large change management project on your hands, get yourself a program manager. It has been instrumental to my success. somebody who can really help you with the communication, the socialization, keeping you structured and organized as you go through it. And also, like, she hounds me for timelines. And you haven't talked to this person. What are you doing? What happens? I can see your calendar. So it really keeps you in check. And so yeah, so I think people, yeah, forget about that. And it has been the factor that has allowed us to move as quickly as we've been able to move.
That's amazing. Okay, so maybe one question to just dig deeper on this. And I do understand if so, like we can ignore the parts of this that might be ugly. Like I don't want to put you on the spot while we're recording, but like you showed up a year ago. You had to come to this conclusion. Like you did some things during your own version of onboarding to be like, "Hey, we aren't sort of seated at the right in the right way to generate the most value for our business." Was it your secret sauce for how you onboarded yourself? Were there aha moments? Like how did you get there and how much time did that take?
All right, I'm gonna spitball at you with some
Okay.
resources. Okay.
Yes.
There's a couple books that I think are really important when you're joining as a data leader to a company. Number one is a book called The Chief Data Officer's Playbook, and it is by Caruthers. I don't remember all the names, but it's a great read and it describes a first generation, a second generation CDO. Even if you're not at that spot, it has amazing insights into like how do you assess the maturity of the organization that you're walking into. So using that template, the very first thing I did was I talked to every single person on my team, every single stakeholder that we had, consolidated all of this, and then I ran a survey across the organization. And this is something I learned in previous places I've worked in, where you go super vulnerable as a leader and you say, do you know what? I want the business's insight about how they view my team and what they think good looks like. So not only is this a vulnerability exercise, it can come off as quite controversial, especially if you're new to the company. And I was like, you know what? No, because I just want to make it right. Right. So I want as much input and data to be able to make this informed decision, especially because I might need to ask for more money or think about budgets and think about transformation. So I want to give the board and the execs the comfort that they need that, you know what, she has the right idea in mind and this is their evidence. So the survey can take a form of whatever you need, but what I would advise is like ask very honest questions like, is your team impactful? Do you find at that point we were called RNA, do you find the RNA team impactful? Do you find the work that we provide helps you in your day job? How often are you blocked by the fact that you don't get supports? So I took all of this together and compiled it and I took my leadership team out of the office into a safe space. And I was like, right, we're going to go through these results. And I think this is a really important part because often when you come into a leadership role and there's a pre-established leadership team, they're so entrenched in it and they're so used to the way things have been working that they kind of don't think about what could be better and how they could shape it because they're just trying to fight fires or provide for their stakeholders. So getting them on board in a way that doesn't put their defenses up is really important. Rallying them around, look at what people have said. Do you guys agree? Getting their buy in that helps then, whatever vision you decide on, to move forward and to put together a plan. And then this next stage is really important. The book I can recommend is Scale at Speed by Felix Velarde, who is a mentor of mine. And the book is intended for agencies actually, but it's super applicable for teams that want to be more effective. And the way he approaches it is he goes, do a SWOT, even though it sounds basic, but actually just do a SWOT and like get people to say, what is a strength that we have as a leadership team? What is a weakness? And do the same exercise for the wider team. And then from there, pivot into understanding what does good actually look like? Because that exercise in itself will show you the maturity of the leadership team that you're dealing with. And if they can't spell out what it is, then you need to do the work to be able to come together to, you know what, by the end of 2025, this is what we want it to look like. So now you've got the input from the survey, you've got the input from the stakeholders, you have this analysis, this workshop that you have run. Now you put it together. And then this is key. You have to go and socialize what you've done with the wider business because that helps keep you accountable. My aim is to do this, and I might be a little bit ambitious, but within the first 90 days. So, yeah, that's, no, don't sleep, don't eat,
Yeah.
just do this.
Who needs to do anything like sleeping or eating? What I love about part of that, I love the whole thing. And I I think a lot of times leaders forget that showing your work helps other leaders. So I really appreciate you walking us through literally tactically. This is how I behaved and what I thought. But my favorite part, again, continues to be Lena's insights. You have this skill set. I don't know if you've heard this in your life before of being able to step back and see the bigger picture and catch insightful things that not everyone sees. But you mentioned this, it's like it's not just about the tactical back and forth exchange of surveys and interviews. It's helping you then at a higher level kind of assess the assessors. Where are our gaps based on what you heard and maybe what you didn't hear? And how does that help you understand what do they need in order to become even better at what we're doing as a business? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. What just occurred to me is even as you rise in seniority in data, don't stop being an analyst. It's just for the data you work with it starts to change. Right?
Yeah.
So it's just an evolution of what you would do if you were just starting out, but applied to a team and
That is so well said, and I've never heard it said like that. So now we're playing with real data, like data that's in a system, but there's still data that's not in a system that's critical to you. And so you're trying to figure out where and how do I understand if that's changing and at what pace. And yeah, I think that's amazing. Okay, so you did all of that literally in 90 days. Is that right?
Yeah, and I will add one thing though. This fixes the first part of the data maturity curve. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with the data maturity curve, but it starts with like just having data to making it accessible, democratized. Then you start using it in terms of a product, and you start monetizing it, right? So that's kind of the curve. This exercise usually helps fix the fundamentals, which is their data, does the data help, and is it accessible to people? The problem and the thing that I think I'm still trying to crack with speed is how do you move from that to the value component? Because the value component has this cultural context to it, which is quite unfamiliar to many settings. And what I'm finding is a lot of businesses put data in a little bit of a box, like what we talked about. You guys give us the reports and you guys give us the service. But then how do you break through and actually show how much value you can bring as a team? What has worked for me before is, if you want me to give you an example, actually, at my previous company, we had a couple of processes that we did every year. And it was a pretty formulaic process, like, line by line, this is what we do this and you will get the same result. But it was like, either a regulatory requirement or a cadence thing. And so when I came in, I was like, well, if we do this a little bit more smartly, like, will this not yield different results? And what I found was in order to get buy in to do this kind of 10% increase in cleverness
Uh
approach,
huh.
right? You do an approach that everyone's familiar with, right? But then you also present this alternative approach with that 10% in it. And man, all of a sudden, it buys you space, it buys you breathing room. And then that is how you start working at multiple areas to try and get people to be like, can you guys try that like different method that you tried with the other team? And then analysts are asked to do not just create a report, like, do you know what? Build a model. Like go and figure out how to make this better. And ultimately, like analysts want to solve those kinds of problems, not a dashboard visualization problem.
Yeah, every day, right? They're waking up every day with a desire to add value in a purposeful way. And to your point, cleaning up the front end of a visualization is not exactly it necessarily. If they get to work on the business, they're going to be 100% more engaged too. That's man, I love it. You just in 90 seconds or less answered the question, how do I get people to stop asking me for a transactional report and actually come to me as a trusted partner in the business about how do we solve these problems with data? Cool. Well done. So, okay, because that was what I was gonna ask too. So, man, we're on a different trajectory. I just didn't know where this conversation would go, and I'm loving it. Because here's where my other curiosity is, though. And I feel like you're talking about the last year in most worlds, this would have been the last half decade. When you got to this point, one of the questions I have is, how are you thinking about your capacity as a team and your ability to say yes to however many hypotheses or questions? Like, how do you make sure you're setting your team up for success? Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, this is juicy. Okay. Right. So let's talk about this. I think a lot of data teams struggle, teams in general, but data teams specifically, in prioritization. But I'm not just saying, right, like we're going to do this, this, and this, and this stakeholder is screaming the loudest, so we're just going to appease them. There isn't a method to the madness that allows you to measure the impact that you've made through the priorities that you have set out. this is something that is really widely talked about in the data landscape. So it's basically saying, so I have all these requests that have come in. How do I know which one I work on that will drive the biggest value? And how do I know which one to tackle because it will ruin our brand or it will piss off or you know what I mean? Well, this is where going back to that program manager or product manager, whatever you want to call this person needs to really help you with these kinds of processes, which is if you have a request, first of all, even if the analysts kill you, like go and make them track it, especially if it's something that will take longer than 2, 3 hours, just track it because it will then help. And you have to sell this in to the analyst, right? Like they have to understand why this is valuable and why they have this. And it has to be embedded in your processes. But within each request, have them put this request in and then track it according to what the cost of this request is. Meaning, what is, for example, if you're using, I don't know, a data center and it's running up your Snowflake cost, or if it's a salary, like how many hours you've spent on it so we can calculate that. Have a cost, right? And then make sure that the analyst is able to attribute some sort of decision or impact or bottom line metric to whatever you're working on. And then you have an ROI figure for your different tickets. And then that starts to become interesting. One of the best methods I've seen is if you build a dashboard, execs are asking for a dashboard, build it, build it, build it. And then you start surfacing things like, this dashboard costs $5,000 to run every single time. Oh, the execs don't ask for that dashboard anymore.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah. And I know that that can seem like you're almost being like an internal agency to your stakeholders, but I think it's really important for us to be able to tie back what we've worked on to the actual value that we've brought to the business. And then you can start talking about actual ROI of the data program and ROI of your data, right? But that's kind of the end goal. That's where you want to get to. The in between is the difficult part because you want to get into a rhythm and you want to get visibility to the stakeholders and you want to have stakeholders battle out priorities between them so that you're not the one that's making decisions on their behalf and then take consequences. So if you've got a marketing stakeholder and I don't know, a revenue stakeholder asking for very important high urgency things, let them speak to each other and go, which one is actually more important before it comes to war and, create that setting.
I just think it's very, very important because I do think in the observations I've had in the industry in the last 5 or 10 years is, we were working on systems as consultants and then we suddenly started working on data. It's like we chased the same maturity model of now there's data products that we're maintaining, but then we still have businesses who it's not their problem or it's not their fault, but they don't understand that in some respects, how do we mature the data organization? How do we help it become more valuable? And how do we also just attribute cost and investment to it appropriately? And so it's been interesting to me that every company I've observed that has a data team, the way they think about those things is it's like we're all just on this journey and it feels a little bit in the dark. Like it feels kind of like we're stumbling around in a closet that without the light on, where it's like, hey, where's my coat? And there's different people at different maturity levels, but no matter what, I think to your point on that data maturity like we're all on the same road actually.
Well,
Everybody's on it.
yeah, and I'm gonna say something that's quite controversial, but the end all be all for me in driving true value from a data team is they need to be on the hook for a line in the P&L. They need to be able to go, I have a data product that I have created, that I have enriched, that I have ensured engineers create the right things. It's well tracked. There are data contracts, there's documentation. And it is my job to make sure it is an asset that is used wherever. So whether it's for segmentation, for CRM, for any kind of marketing, and then it becomes this data product is directly related to revenue or a cost optimization. And then your data team becomes jointly accountable and all the people involved in creating this piece of data jointly accountable for this OKR or this KPI or whatever it is, then it's a different ball game. And there are companies who have done this, right? The Amazons and the Twitters, et cetera. Well, many companies are quite far away from that. So it's like, how do we move up incrementally towards that space?
Well, okay, so I need to ask, I seriously think I could talk to you for 3.5 hours, and I have so many questions. Let me ask you just a couple other things, and then I wanna see if there's anything that you wanna double down on that we haven't talked about yet. One of the questions I have for you, you started to talk about some of these hypotheses and the way that your team has sort of infiltrated all aspects of the business, which I think is rightly so. Do you have an example that you could tell us about that's like, hey, on the user experience, here's data we've leveraged to make an adjustment to it. Maybe the data team is helping improve. You guys have these other features now, like how to meet a friend. I'm assuming that some of that was born out of data insights, but do you have any examples?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to the different teams that we have and how they work as examples. So for example, like on our product analytics team, they are completely in tandem with the product managers. So they are jointly responsible for all experimentation. No feature goes live without an analyst's help. It's actually really robust. We have a whole process. We have a platform where, we run all of our experimentation, but all of the analysis is also really interesting because what it does is it looks at the user experience, but it also attempts to go right. So if we extrapolate this user experience to the wider audience, what is that going to translate to in terms of business KPIs? So that we can then feed that back into any adjustments for how we think we're progressing across all of our different KPIs. That's just one example. But in general, like we find opportunities work best for us and we are able to partner with teams the most if we are brought on as early as possible for a project. So if we say we are, we're honing in on a segment of users and we really need deep insights about the segment and how it performs against marketing or the app, if we're there during the planning, we're able to assess the feasibility of like, can we actually create these segments? Can we operationalize them? So it is actually something that we've been doing most recently. And what we found is like, yeah, we do have to create some dashboards to allow our stakeholders to kind of self monitor what's going on in these segments. But ultimately, actually taking these more enriched segments that we've created and applying them to various marketing tactics or promotional tactics, whatever, has been instrumental in being able to kind of enhance the customer experience, but also just to target better. You don't want to see an ad that like doesn't make sense to you. So those are the kinds of projects that like we really see the most value from my team is when we are there from the beginning in the ideation phases.
That makes sense. The investments are better prioritized when you've got somebody who's analytically thinking about is it the right thing and what is right. Okay, my other question is a little bit out there, so it's okay if you're like, nah, pass. But you are insightful. In your crystal ball, Lena, do you have an opinion? So, yes, we're talking about how to infiltrate, how do we leverage data in every aspect of a business? Does that include strategy for Bumble? I've always had this question since I met my husband on one of the apps in, I guess it was 9 years ago, 10 years ago, which is like at some point, data science is getting so smart that there's a plausible concept that like could somebody click a button one day and ta-da, there they are, there's your future partner. Are those real conversations or am I making this up? And it's like, no, that's not really like, that's not a thing. Like when you think about the strategy of Bumble, are you guys involved, and do you have an answer to my geeky question?
We are very data driven as a company. Data is in all of our planning. It is in all of our strategy work. It is in our, multi-year vision. So that's for sure. Well, I'm struggling to answer is like going to be that instantaneous because what I'm thinking about is the macroeconomic factors and you as a human being, how mutable and changeable both of those things are, no matter how good your algorithm is and how well trained your LLM is not going to be able to account for in real time. I mean, we're getting there, right? Let's not lie. Like you've seen what you can do. The tech is getting there. But the other thing is people don't want to get on the platform and meet the first person. And or some who do, but a lot of people don't.
Right.
So
That's not the only experience people are looking for. That's right.
like, exactly. And I think the difficulty in it all is figuring out which kind of person you are. And that might also change given on your
Yeah, right? In the future, maybe here, this is free consulting. You could just have a little radio button of I'm looking for my life partner or I'm not. And it's like,
what
okay,
if
well,
that
then we,
changes daily? What if some days you're like, yeah, I want a life partner. Next you're like, no, I just
let's be honest, it does probably change daily.
have a partner. And you're like, "Ugh."
You have one bad date and you're like, never mind. That's amazing. Well, I am so impressed. I'm so impressed with you, and I really appreciate both. I mean, it just seems like you have walked this incredible balance beam of leadership, insights, and experience in solving the hardest problems you can find to get your hands on in your career that have led you here, and this really incredible data journey. So I'm just color me impressed, Lena, with where you're at, the leadership skills you have, and your willingness and generosity to share those insights. Before we go, is there anything else that you really, really want to get to talk about that we haven't discussed?
I think we've covered everything. I've had a lot of laughs.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to get one more question out there that I'm curious about
What?
that's selfish. Here's my other question. I'm going to tell you what some of my thoughts are, and you're going to tell me what's real. One of the things I was curious about in your data modeling and the work you guys do is in my community a decade ago, I noticed that it was like whole clusters of people would kind of be on one app for a minute. Oh, we had some bad dates. It wasn't great. And then they'd all kind of move over to this other app, but then they'd eventually come back. It was like this weird ebb and flow of users leaving and coming back and leaving and coming back. Is some of that things that you guys track too when it comes to users? Are they deleting the app and then are they signing back up? Or are you tracking long term user attrition? Like, how do you guys measure? I guess what I'm really getting at too is like success. Like, to your point, not everybody wants to meet someone. And then for your business model, then are they not on the app anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I mean, what's interesting is that ebb and flow is just network effects. It's actually not just present in dating. It's something that we see when I was at Hilton. It was the same thing. People would go direct or go book through an online travel agent. And it just depends on what the incentives of the users are, right? So for us, ultimately, we care about the customer experience, right? And we want customers to have the best experience on the app. And yes, of course, find the love of their lives and then never return to the app again. Yes. But life isn't that easy, right? So there is a certain level of expectation for us where like people might be coming back and forth. And all we can do is ensure that, the people that we provide them with and the app experience that they have is what they want and what they need for the time that they're in.
That makes so much sense. That's amazing. Awesome. Hey, thank you for letting me give you some curveballs here. I've just been so excited to hear and learn from your amazing, amazing mind.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And hey, if people want to follow you in life, is the best way for them to reach you LinkedIn? Is that right?
Yeah.
Guys, thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jess Carter. If you're interested in learning more from Lina, you can connect with her on LinkedIn, like we mentioned. The link will be in the show notes. And don't forget to follow Data Driven Leadership wherever you get your podcasts. Rate and review, letting us know how these data topics are transforming your business and you. We can't wait for you to join us on the next episode.